So you love podcasts, and you want to listen to more amazing content, but you have no idea what to listen to. And your friends keep telling you about great episodes, yet you can never remember what they told you. Well, here's the answer. Good Pods. It's the social app dedicated to podcasts where your friends, podcast listeners, and favorite podcast hosts all come together to share on their feeds what they recommend and what they listen to. You can connect to others, bookmark episodes, start a conversation about the episode, connect to the hosts, and most importantly, listen to great podcasts right in the Good Pods app. Download Good Pods wherever you get your apps and start sharing with a community that loves to listen. Good Pods. It's where to connect and listen.
So here's how it works. You take the blue pill, the story ends, you wake up in your bed, and you believe whatever you want to believe. You take the red pill, you listen to Thrive Loud, and Lou shows you how deep the rabbit hole goes.
Get ready to Thrive Loud with Lou Diamond.
Welcome, everyone, to another episode of Thrive Loud with Lou Diamond, connecting you to the most inspiring and amazing people that are thriving each and every day. I'm your host, Lou Diamond. I'm excited for today because today on Thrive Loud, we have the founder and CEO of SmallDotBig, providing innovation and growth solutions for entrepreneurs and multi-generational businesses. She is the host of Succession Stories, a podcast that focuses on family business leaders and industry experts to provide listeners with insights to grow their business, develop transition strategies, and lead for the future. A longtime friend of mine from just outside of Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. Thrive Loud listeners, Laurie Barkman. Hi, Laurie. How are you today?
Lou, I'm awesome. So glad to be with you today. Thanks for having me.
I'm excited because the entrepreneurial spirit you've had your whole life is really cool, but I'm more excited that you've come to the dark side and decided to go to the other side of the microphone and be a podcast host, which is pretty cool. I want our listeners, though, to hear about what you focus on, because this is an area I have crisscrossed in my consulting career about these multi-generational businesses and a lot of the challenges they have. And I think it'll be really cool to explain your story a little bit. And I think that will help paint the picture for our conversation. That sound like a good kickoff point for you?
That sounds awesome.
Good. Take it away. Tell me how this became your gig, really. This became an expertise of yours.
This became my gig because it's something that has been building in my portfolio of skills and expertise over the past 20 plus years. And I would say that my skill set is kind of unique in that I've had a number of pivots from the startup venture-backed technology company to the multi-billion-dollar publicly traded company and everything in between. And it's been my experience that in both types of companies, you have the need to innovate, you have the need to grow, to transform, to transition leadership, to grow people. And so it's different how it gets executed and built, and the tool sets are different. But I think what I've seen at really well-established companies is they get so ingrained in their silos, and it gets difficult to implement new ideas. And so if a company has a need to grow and change, especially if they see disruption on the horizon, it might be too late, and hopefully it's not. But if there's a desire to change and innovate, a lot of times well-established legacy businesses like multi-generational family businesses, they just don't have the culture of innovation that a more nimble type of company like a startup from the very, very beginning is meant to be disruptive. You know, they don't have that mindset. So I've gotten more and more excited about helping bring a change mindset and toolkit to well-established traditional businesses, many of which are multi-generational companies, to enable them to achieve their growth objectives or their long-term value creation objectives.
Laurie, I love the expression, you can't choose your family. However, when you're in a family business, sometimes you don't have a choice but to choose that family business. I wanted to get your perspective as it relates to the familial aspect of these companies. From a culture perspective, help maybe understand or help explain to the listeners a little bit about the challenges that no other place has but these type of companies.
It's been so fun talking to experts who work with family businesses all the time and talking to fifth, sixth generation CEOs and owners of companies. It's been really amazing. I've done a number of interviews so far, and one thing that pops out is that there does tend to be an entrepreneurial gene. So I'm going to explore that more deeply in other episodes. But I'm also hearing that there is a need for exploration and understanding that you are kind of taking the business home with you, right? Especially at the Thanksgiving table. Family businesses are different. One woman said, it's difficult when you have to fire your grandpa. and you think about that for a second and it kind of hits you. And the other thing that is so important in these multi-generational businesses is that the business itself is cherished in a way that if you're an employee at a company and you're kind of just getting a paycheck and showing up every day and just, sort of punching it in, it's not the same feeling as when you are literally part of that ownership structure. You are literally part of that legacy, and it becomes like your grandmother's china. You want to protect it. You want it to keep in a good place, and you want it to be passed on to the next generation. And so there's certainly a sense of family that comes across with the leadership. But I think what I'm also seeing is this extension of family. A family-run business sometimes also has a sense of values that they share within their teams and their culture within their company that becomes so ingrained and so important, and everybody is part of that. And so it might be Mr. Smith's name on the door, but the pride that comes with being part of that entity is shared amongst family and not family alike.
Yeah. I share the story with you, Laurie, that I've done a lot of consulting throughout the years and have helped out multi-generational businesses, learning statistics like there's an 8% survival rate of a business making it to the third generation. And for many reasons, sometimes the business sells out, sometimes the businesses change and they things like any business would go away. But one of the biggest challenges, obviously, is the nepotism can work against you. Can you share maybe a story or an instance from your experience where basically because of the fact that they've kind of kept family in the business wasn't always the best decision for the company?
I can share a few stories from my own experience when I worked at a third generation privately held company. There were the sons were not part of the business. They were on the family council, but they themselves did not work in the business. And so my experience at that company was more of about outside leadership being brought in for succession. So that's my personal story. Yeah. The other stories that I'm understanding from talking to these amazing guests on the Succession Stories podcast is about that balance and being really sensitive to that issue for the next generation. So for example, one of my guests, Shelley Taylor, she did a great job talking about that from two perspectives. One is she has worked with hundreds of multi-generational businesses over the last 20 years. She's I'll call her an expert in family business advising. And the other side of Shelley is that she is the chair of the company that she's involved with. Her husband's family company is called Abarta, and she serves as the family council chair for Abarta. And so she wears two different hats there, and she has a very deep understanding what that's like. And so she shared some amazing stories about that. And so one of the things she talked about is in their experience, helping the next generation see what it's about before they're even ready to consider a job. So for example, they have like a coming of age ceremony at age 14, I think it is, where they get a coin, and the coin is symbolic of decision making. So what they say as a family and the ownership structure, they don't want it to ever get to a coin flip where a big decision is going to come down to a coin flip. They want to avoid that at all costs. But the symbolism of that coin, giving it to that 14, the age 14 person, it's really an important moment because then they understand what that means, that it's about family, it's about leading together, and they've developed a really nice governance structure and a strategic way to work together as family, an extended family, very diverse family. They have international Zoom calls, if you will, where the families all over the world, and they'll dial in for their family council meetings. And so I share that just as an example. I'm sure there are many others I could, share with you, but that one stood out to me as a way to get the next generation on board. And what they also do is they take a very significant approach to mentoring, and they want people to start in roles where they're growing from the inside, and they understand what it means to have that last name, and they don't take it for granted. And I actually have heard that theme from a few other companies as well. And I think that's a common thing, realization for companies that are going to be successful in bringing in that next generation of leadership, that, yeah, you have the name, but you kind of need to really get in there and work in there from the inside. Another great example was this gentleman from Columbus, Ohio, Mike Schedinger. Mike is sixth generation of the Schedinger family cremation company.
Oh my goodness.
And yeah, they have an amazing business helping families, take care of their loved ones at the end. And so burial and cremation services, but they're very innovative. And he was a great it was great to talk to him, because he definitely had that perspective of the legacy and what it means to continue onwards, but then also coming in he himself, he shared his own story, what that was like. And he talked a little bit about the next generation too.
Yeah, it is interesting. And I remembered one particular company I'd worked with, and I've done a lot of speaking with companies that fall into that particular niche, to the leaders and the challenges they have. And I remembered this one guy had this wonderful tactic, and it was important. I love the coin symbolism. I also like what this particular company did, and that was to kind of recognize that entitlement is something that is not tolerated in certain companies. And what they actually did in this particular organization was you were not allowed to come to work for the company until you worked elsewhere in other industries first. And they gave them a window for this. And that has actually helped to bring the business to where it needs to and grow, because they're getting other experiences that they can add back should that option be available to them. What's your thoughts on that, just from your experience, from those that you've been dealing with versus maybe those that only go into the family business immediately?
I think that's super important. And I do want to echo that theme, that suggestion, recommendation, insight has been very common across these interviews. Both Shelley and Mike, the two examples I shared with you, both talked about that, the importance of trying to look outside. Specifically with Abarta, they had created a policy where the family members needed to go get X number of years of experience before coming to work in the business. And they've since made some modifications to that, but that was something that they definitely had talked about. And for Mike and his experience, I think he is someone that joined kind of right after college, but in discussions with him and about his personal experience and what was so important in their culture, and something that came from his grandfather directly, is to really get hands-on with all of the roles. And so you can imagine what all those roles might be in a family burial and cremation services company. And he definitely took that to heart. And in an interview I did with Jim Rooney, Jim is the son of Dan Rooney, and some of you are Steelers football fans, you'll recognize that name. And Jim talked about that for his father and that legacy from Art Rooney. And Art was the founder of the Steelers. And so that was something that even, and you think of that, football might not be a business, but it definitely is. And the way that the Rooney family has created that culture of leadership. And so the succession, even within a team like the Steelers, right, the management team, there's that culture and sense of, okay, it isn't an entitlement. You're going to either work elsewhere, you're going to learn something, and then when you're ready to come in, you're going to be part of something that's an amazing legacy, and you're going to understand what these roles are and the responsibilities that come with it.
I was going to ask this question before I dive a little more into having the listeners learn more about you, Laurie. And that is breaking apart from the business. One of the biggest challenges that any business experience is, maybe being acquired or selling the business off to somebody else or getting out of the business. When it comes to those decisions, is it extra hard? And should it be extra hard to make that decision to sell, because there's that sense of it feels like it's a part of you and it's literally your name or your brand? Just maybe from your perspective and your expertise, those are tough decisions to make for any company, let alone multi-generational family businesses. Just from your experience, I wanted to hear your 2 cents.
You're right, Lou. And the answer is it depends. There is no one answer. And that's what I'm understanding as part of these different conversations. And I'm talking with private equity groups. I'm talking with entrepreneurs who have bought businesses from family owned, from the owners. So I'm really trying to get a 360-degree view of this to understand what that answer might be. And again, I think the answer is it depends. From my experience at the 3rd generation company I mentioned earlier, they had taken in some private equity money, so there was some partial liquidity well before I got there, and certainly a desire to get a return on investment. And so it wasn't completely a shock when we were part of an acquisition and went through that experience, which was quite incredible. But I think what did surprise us at the leadership level was maybe when and how it came together. Because it was what they call a bluebird. It just came and landed, and it ended up being a great thing. The company sold to FedEx. And so for me, seeing what that was like from the inside, from an M&A perspective and due diligence as part of the management team, that was an incredible experience. Now, when I'm talking to others in what I call the ecosystem, I'm hearing that there are some founders / I can't call it first generation, but you get the idea of that owner, whenever he or she is ready to consider options, and what those options might be vary as well, right? It could be partial liquidity to take in money for investment and try to grow, or it could be there aren't any folks within the family that are interested in taking it over. And so the founder starts to look at outside options, maybe and selling the company totally. Maybe they'll consider what's called an ESOP, which is an employee stock ownership plan, which that can have a lot of benefits. And so it really depends on where the owner is in there's kind of Venn diagram. If you think about it visually, there's the personal objectives for that person, there's the financial, and then there's the business. And a lot of instances, owners are so emotionally and tied in. So emotion kind of sits on top of all three. And back to your question, that's why it depends, because everyone's scenario about what they're looking for in that next phase of their life could vary depending on what ultimately their goals are.
Yeah. I'll save one of my points for the end of our conversation about one of the other avenues that goes in there, which is ego. But we'll wrap on that. But I want to now ask the question, because I've been a little privy to some of your early research before you decided to get on the other side of the microphone and become a podcast host. How has it been hosting this program? I think that's a very leading question based on your excitement so far in this interview. But how has it been being a host of Succession Stories?
I am really enjoying it, Lou. And I want to thank you, because you are one of those people that immediately said, oh, go for it. You got to go for it. And there's a handful of people that have been just cheerleaders and sponsors of mine on the side, my husband being one of them. And he's a good friend of yours. His name's Martin. And I want to thank him too. I had some very good friends that just saying words of encouragement. And so that's been just really fun. I think for me, in being a new business, independent business owner, if I can call that something, I created SmallDotBig, a consulting firm, 8 years ago. That might surprise you. I created it 8 years ago, and I put it on ice. I essentially had 2 clients that were friends of mine. It was great. It was a summertime. Things worked out. And then when I started, those projects started to complete, and I thought, oh, what am I going to do next? What is business development? How do I do that? I realized this wasn't for me. I just wasn't ready. And last year, towards the end of the year, I said to myself, are you really, where's your sparkle? Where are you, where are you in this, in terms of your career? And Martin and I talked about it, and I said, I'm just ready to go. I'm ready to go all in. And it's hard to go from being what I'll call, I guess I'm a strategic person and I've been a CEO and all those things, but I'm a doer. I like to get things done. And so to take the time and think about what it is I'm good at, what it is I enjoy. I had lunch with a friend almost about a year ago. She's an entrepreneur. She's created a restaurant chain. I'll give her a little plug, called Chula in the Pittsburgh area, Indian food. It's such high quality. And the way they go about it, it's almost like artisanal, really great. We had an awesome lunch. I wanted to talk to her in her restaurant and talk to her about her experience. And she said at the end of the lunch, she goes, "You should do a podcast." I looked at her, I was like, "What are you talking about?" She goes, "No, really, I think you should." And I think what she meant by that is that I'm a pretty good listener. And I thought about that in terms of, hey, I have my own business now, and I want to have a platform to talk from. People who know me, they enjoy working with me. I have wonderful colleagues and friends and family, and that feels great. But how do you expand the circle beyond that? And so that's one of the reasons why I really started thinking about podcasting. I listened to your show, we talked, and the encouragement was so important to me. So to find a platform to build from was really where I started. And I looked to my own experience, as I mentioned earlier, from being a hired management leader at a third generation company where the family was not part of that succession. They needed outside folks. I was 42. And in my interview, he said to me, my boss, "I'm not interviewing you for the next 2 years. I'm interviewing you for the next 20. And I almost fell off my chair because I had worked in startups and I had worked in environments where it's up or out, and it's such high pressure. And not that this wouldn't have been, it certainly was a performance-oriented type of role to be a CEO of a subsidiary. But at the same time, I understood that the perspective as a closely held company was different. Yeah. This was about the long term. And that really struck me. So I thought, wow, can't I have great conversations with people who are that next generation entrepreneur, that person who has either bought the business or gotten that transition as a family member in the business, and all these supporting partners and thought leaders in this ecosystem that enable these family-owned businesses to grow and thrive in the long term. And that's the essence of the show, and that's how it all came together.
It's great because I consult lots of other people who are looking to start shows and say, "Why the heck do you do this program?" Although the listeners seem to like it, but we get great people like yourself who have a laser focus actually, and a great topic that covers a huge amount of different industries, but yet a specific niche of a type of business. And I think that is brilliant unto itself. And we will make sure we put all the links and things out there for people to connect to the show when we get to that part of the show. But I think it's great. And I'm proud of you, just to let you know, because, I've already started listening. You already get better guests than I can get on this program. It's a little ridiculous.
Thank you.
So, but let's cover this. You've been a successful, the listeners need to know this, and they could look her up in her bio. She's been an incredible marketer over the years. Very successful entrepreneur. She obviously has her own company. She's hosting a podcast show. And Laurie, you're also a mom and, rocking and rolling, always trying to get things done. And like many people in the middle of quarantine, while we're recording this today, we could have off days where we're not quite kicking on all cylinders. Laurie, when you have trouble thriving, who or what practice do you seek to get back on the thriving track?
I immediately go find my dogs. I have 2 of the fluffiest little dogs, and they are great coworkers because they love all my ideas. And and I go find them and I pet them, and they're not therapy dogs, but I think they would be awesome therapy dogs. They are just the love, and they bring it forward every day. And so I kind of do that. But I also listen to podcasts. I read books. I talk to friends, and I'll go outside and go for a walk. And I think the answer is a variety of things. And I'm an extrovert by nature. And so I seek others to talk to listen, to share. And my dogs are pretty good listeners too.
Best answer. I got to tell you, I think in the 500 some odd guests we've had on the program, no one's ever just specifically led with the dogs. I love that. That's great. Maybe we need some artwork for the podcast show to get a picture of them so we can put it on the page there.
You got it.
Let's do that right now. Let's do the plugs, get the admin part of the show out of the way. Laurie, if you could share with everybody where they could find you, Succession Stories, website, social media. We will put it all in the show notes. However, it always gets more engagement when they hear it from you.
Thank you. My website is small.big.com. And if you say /Succession Stories, you'll get all of the episodes to stream directly from my website. The blog also has individual episodes and lots of detail about each episode and the guest. And all my show, Succession Stories podcast, is available in all the players. So if you're out there on iTunes or Apple Podcast, Google, etc., you'll find it. Just type in Succession Stories. And I'd love to hear from my listeners. I'm very much looking for feedback and ideas. And so they can email me directly or DM me, but I'm available, Laurie Barkman, on LinkedIn and Facebook and Instagram. They can email me successionstoriespodcast@gmail.com.
We're also going to put a special promo for you, Laurie, on Good Pods, which will get you to start using that more often. Probably the best place to connect and listen to your podcast listeners so they can connect to you. So we'll make sure you're on there as well. We'll talk more.
I am on there, but thank you. Yes, thank you. And I'm on Good Pods.
Okay, perfect. We'll get you there. All right. So let's go down Fun Street because this is going to be fun because I got special questions for you. Okay. So first of all, share with the listeners your all-time favorite movie, if you could.
My all-time favorite is Ferris Bueller's Day Off.
So before I ask why this movie specifically connects with you, I thought this was rather timely because at the time of recording this episode here in mid to late April, one of my favorite podcasts show, The Rewatchables, this week did the feature on Ferris Bueller's Day Off. So I even rewatched it recently. So what specifically, or what connects you to that movie so much? Why is it so the all-time favorite for you?
First of all, I love Matthew Broderick in that role. I just think he's hilarious. And it came out when I was in high school. And so I might've been a junior or senior in high school. And so it just was the genre, it was the time, and it just brings me back to those days. I also loved, it's just such a classic movie because it did such a great job of showing the different cliques in high school. Yeah. And he just transcended all of that, and how his demeanor was, and the high school secretary who, the famous clip where she's saying the geeks, the dweebs, they all love him. It just was every scene, there was something funny or takeaway, except for the one pool scene where that wasn't so funny, when Cameron was catatonic. But otherwise, it was about appreciating life, appreciating nature, appreciating those around you. And I guess, maybe for today's high school seniors where they can't celebrate the way that we have in the past, maybe there's some inspiration there for looking back and being nostalgic and appreciating what we had then. And by the way, I remember going to the theater and they used to give away posters. I guess they sometimes still do that. So I have a poster, like legit, from the movie opening poster in my office.
That is amazing. I love that. Oh my goodness. I don't think you probably grew up in a cooler place than I did because I don't think they were giving away posters in New York City. But anyway, so does Laurie have a certain song or jam that she loves to hear that help kicks her into another gear?
If I have a channel on Spotify, it's the Coldplay channel. Oh. And so anything in the Coldplay channel, I'm good. And I find, by the way, if I have a party, if I have a cocktail party, dinner party, Martin always asks me, what channel do you want? And I always say the same answer, the Coldplay channel, because it's got the mix of Mumford and Sons and U2 and Coldplay. And those are some of my favorite bands.
What did I just learn the other day? That the song Yellow is 20 years old. I felt like I got age spots popping out when I heard that. I'm like, what? That song came out in 2000? Oh my goodness.
That's so cool that you mentioned that song Yellow, because that was my walk-on song when I got an award, and they asked us if you want to have some walk-on music, what would it be? And I actually picked that song. So cool that you thought of that.
It's one of my favorites. It's without a doubt. And all their songs are great. So I love that. Okay. Now I have to ask the question, because I wrote it down in my notes before we would have the conversation. Are you a fan of the television show Succession?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely. That is it is a great show. And if your audience has not watched it, I highly recommend it.
I think it's really interesting. Look, like any show on television or movie, they always try to exaggerate or accentuate certain aspects of it. But family dynamic, ego, complications, backstabbing, all the things that are, sexy about any 1980s sitcom or drama, like whether it be Dynasty or Dallas, has been blown up to whole new levels on Succession. And this is some of the best behind the scenes acting. And it also has a little bit of it's based off of a real family situation. I think you know that, right? Do you know the behind the scenes of that?
Yeah, that's the rumor, I guess. I don't know if it's confirmed that it's the Murdoch family, but
Yeah.
It certainly comes to mind when you watch the show. They are great actors. Each character they've built up in an amazing way. And Macaulay Culkin's brother, I think his real name might be Ronan. Is that right? Culkin. He's my favorite.
And what's ironic, as Ferris Bueller's Day Off is one of your favorite movies, that Cameron is in the show.
That's right.
He's the older brother who's had no interest in being involved in the family business. And I think it does a good thing. So as I was watching that show, which is spectacular, listeners, go check it out. It's great acting and great drama, but I think it also brings this whole thing to a point that every family business has its own story. And I think it's great that you're taking that leap and focusing on what you know really well and helping to share those stories, the good, the bad, the ugly, with the listening audience. And I think just like the show is entertaining to watch, listening is great as well. So continued success to you, Laurie, with all this. And I hope you're having fun.
Thank you, Lou. I'm having a blast. There's been nights I've been staying up till 2, 3 in the morning, just working on different things, whether it's my website or whether it's the blog. And I feel invigorated, and I've never felt that way before. And I think the difference is that I am marketing a product called Laurie Barkman, and I've never done that before, and it feels great, actually.
Laurie, I'll let you know that we got through this entire podcast. I did not make fun of your husband once, who's a good friend of mine, but I easily could have. I want to give her credit, though, that she is the only woman to have shown up in my generational crew for a reunion of my fraternity's 100th anniversary up at school. The only woman to show up, the only spouse, and you still will be always at the top of the list of spouses because of that list, that fact, which is incredible, which we always put you on another level.
Thank you. That's quite a dubious honor, but I will accept with gratitude.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for coming on Thrive Loud today, Laurie.
Thanks, Lou. I appreciate it. It's been great.
And to all our listeners out there, thank you for joining us. And until next time, keep thriving onward and upward. And remember, be brief, be bright, be gone.
You've been listening to Thrive Loud with your host, Lou Diamond. Check us out on the web at thriveloud.com and follow us on Instagram, LinkedIn, Twitter, and Facebook at Thrive Loud. And check us out on the Good Pods app at Thrive Loud, where you can follow, listen, and connect directly to Lou and all of the Thrive Loud episodes. Thanks for listening.